This is Julie Pearson Little Thunder with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University. Today is Saturday, May 12, 2018, and I'm interviewing Lahoma Schultz at the Glenpool Public Library. Lahoma, you're a Muscogee Creek citizen and you've been a force in the Native community for years. But since earning your doctorate in counseling at OSU, your contributions have multiplied even more. You're a supervisory clinical psychologist with Indian Health Service at Clinton, and you've also worked closely with Native veterans at White Eagle and through other programs. You're a volunteer for many community organizations. I look forward to hearing more about you, including your time at OSU and some of the highlights since you've graduated. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me.
You're welcome.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Dewar, Oklahoma, which is in Muscogee County, just down the road from here. I grew up in Oklahoma City.
What did your folks do for a living?
My father was employed by Tinker Air Force Base. When I was born, he was already working there. He obtained that position after the war, World War II, and he raised his family there in Oklahoma City. And my mother was a stay-at-home mother.
Any brothers or sisters?
I had two older siblings. The oldest of the siblings was my brother, Emmanuel, but we called him Bugs Hicks. And my sister was Lawanta. And those were the two older siblings. Then I came after her. And then there was a set of twins after me, Pamela and Monroe. And then there was two younger ones after Monroe and Pam, and two brothers. So I had three younger brothers, one younger sister, one older sister, and one older brother. So.
What was your relationship with your grandparents on either side?
On either side? Well, it's sad to say my grandfather on my mother's side was already deceased when I was born. My grandmother on my mother's side died the same year that I was born. I was born in February. She died in December of 1951. But while she was living with my mother's first three pregnancies, my older brother, my older sister, and myself, she wanted my mother to have her children back in their home area. That's why I was born in Muscogee County versus being born in Oklahoma City where my parents were actually living. So, but I never knew those two. I didn't know my grandmother or my grandfather on the maternal side. The grandfather and grandmother on my paternal side, I knew my grandfather up until I was 9 years old. And he was a leader of one of our ceremonial grounds, the Arbika ceremonial ground. He was not sure about what his proper title was, but he was generally the main leader for the dances, the singer. And my grandmother, he raised crops, of course, on his 160 acres. He raised pigs and chickens and horses and he raised corn and I guess everything that they needed, And he bartered with the local guys who were mostly non-native. And this is a story I learned from a lady who was the school marm or school teacher to my dad and his brothers there in that area, the Arbika area. The story she told me is that my grandfather had lots of things that the local non-natives wanted to barter with him, but he would not barter with them unless they learned to speak his language, which was Creek. So those guys really did. They learned to speak the language because they wanted whatever it was that Mr. Hicks had to barter with them. And I thought that was a pretty cool story. I learned about that when I was a social worker working that area. Then years later, when I was working on my dissertation, I learned from my uncle that my grandfather had actually attended boarding school in Carlisle, way up the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he didn't appreciate them forcing him to learn English. So he kind of turned the tables,
That's a great
kind of turned
story.
the tables and said, if I had to learn to speak English, then you can learn to speak my language. And then my grandmother, of course, she didn't speak English at all. She just strictly traditional lady, took care of the home, took care of her husband, was always working for the next ceremony, So she was very traditional, but a very loving grandmother. She would take care of us. I don't know how we communicated, but she had an Indian name for every one of us kids, and so we knew when she called our name, we had to go to her, and for whatever reason it might be, But we managed because we didn't speak the language.
Mm-hmm. With your folks. What were some of your special interests in school? Can you remember starting out, just from the beginning in elementary school?
From the beginning, elementary school, probably reading, and that started with first grade. I was one of all the children in our family, I was the one that was not very healthy. I was born with a hole in my heart, had to be cared for forever, even to this day I have to watch myself. But my family, my mom, my dad, my aunts, my uncles, my paternal grandmother, they all really cared for me, because like grandma, she didn't know. She would, mix up her Indian medicine, whatever, and then she'd put me in the tub and bathe me in that because her understanding was I was sick.
Mm-hmm.
So she was doing what she could to help heal me, we accepted it, But what I'm talking about that is because I think I was in the first grade. Christmas play. We were up on stage singing. We had a little choir. And I remember I had been sick leading up to those days, but I wanted to sing with the rest of the kids. So I wasn't feeling great, but I was there and I was up on the stage with them on the podium, Lord. And I got weak and I fell. And so I don't remember what happened after that, but I know Mom and Dad didn't really know what happened either. They just thought I'd had a sore throat and they were trying to take care of it. But after that play, I couldn't walk. I lost the ability to walk. My left leg just wouldn't hold up. So Mom would scoop me around in the house in a chair, like a little wheelchair, but it didn't have wheels, just so I could go do whatever. If I had to go to the bathroom, she would scoop me around. They finally got me set up with the Oklahoma Children's Hospital in Oklahoma City, and that's when they discovered that I had the hole in my heart, and that what had happened was I'd had strep throat, and that infection affected my heart, and it had got so advanced that I had St. Vitus's dance. That's what they called it, St. Vitus's dance, which meant I couldn't use that left leg. So I was in the hospital for about 3 months, And while we were there, they had us in children's wards, so there were lots of children there. They would take us to class, but we were all different ages, so, they did the best that they could. So they had me on a gurney. Every time I'd go to class, I'd be on a gurney, and they'd fix this little device for me. It's like a little periscope, and it would, I could see the words. I didn't have to look down like this because it was difficult. But I could see the words up in front of me, and I would read. So I thought that was pretty cool. They were helping me stay up on my reading.
Yes.
Then when I did return back to school, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Hayden, little old lady, little white-haired lady, she broke the news to me. She goes, Lahoma, you've gotten behind in your reading. I'm going to have to keep you in from recess until you catch up with the other kids. But I'm going to be right there, and I'm going to help you. And she did. She would sit down with me. She would grab a book. She'd sit like you are sitting right now, and she would have me read the book until I got it, until I actually did catch up to the level of the other kids. And I just thought that was so nice of her. Really, she's my favorite teacher ever, because she wasn't, she just was matter of fact. You got behind, I'm going to help you.
Supported that.
And she did. So first grade. My first grade teacher was probably the one teacher that really impressed me.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Did you have any experiences, I don't know, in elementary, middle school, high school that might have pointed you in the direction of psychology, being interested in psychology?
Well, I think I was just interested in people since I was a kid. I was a very quiet and shy kid. And I had my siblings, of course, to interact. And when I was with them and my cousins, rambunctious, just like a regular kid. We were kind of unique. We were one of only 2 Native American families that lived in the neighborhood, and most everybody else was Caucasian. But and our parents made sure we stayed involved with the native ways, traditional ways and all. We were always down this part of the country, the eastern part of Oklahoma. But I guess when I was in the hospital, not being able to move and situated in like a little crib, even if we were older, we still had to stay in cribs. So I was always curious about the other children and what was going on with them. Some had polio and some had other issues. But it was interesting that now that I think about it, most of them are non-native. Most of them were all Caucasian. I don't remember seeing any African Americans or blacks. It was just me, this little native girl, and all these non-natives. And then since it was a teaching hospital, doctors came around most every morning during the week, and they would stand around your bed, which was interesting. Mm-hmm. And they would all, listen to your heart, or mine anyway. Others had other conditions, but mine, they would listen to my heart. They would talk about the rating, their professional opinion as to how intense the murmur was. And I found that very interesting. These are professionals. They're discussing this patient, and right here in front of the patient, And so I was a little, my uncle used to call me a little old lady, because I was kind of curious and just liked to watch people. I could be a normal kid, but a lot of times I wasn't so normal because I was just sitting around listening to people, thinking what's going on with them, what are they thinking, why do they do that? Like one young man, he was older than us, and I guess he had polio. But to entertain us, he would get up on his crib and hold out one end here, one end here, and he would just swing himself back and forth like a monkey. And I used to think about that, I think, why is he doing that? I mean, I guess he thinks it's funny, and it is to a certain extent. But he just does it all the time, There wasn't really anything. I mean, he did have polio and he couldn't use his legs. But it's just why he chose to do that, So yes, a lot of experiences.
Mm-hmm. And your inability to walk passed after 6 months, or?
After about 6 months, I was able to walk again, and I didn't have to stay in there. But there were a couple other times when they had me admitted because they were going to do open heart surgery. Once when I was 6 years old, another time when I was 12. And of course, they didn't have, it wasn't anything like it is now. So I was going to be basically an experiment. And it didn't happen. They called it off both times. But yes, I've always been curious about people. I like to watch people even now. I can go to Disney World where there are lots of people, and my family can be enjoying the rides or whatever. And if they can't find me, they say, well, just go look around the benches because mom's probably sitting there watching people. You know, I'm just curious about people.
And I'm also thinking that having been sick for that period of time, really developed your sense of empathy too.
Yes, 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 very much so.
Well, so you get to high school, and are you thinking about college in high school, and what are you thinking of as your kind of future path? What are you?
Well, high school and junior high, where I went to school, were all together. So
Okay.
from the 7th to the 12th. And my family, my brothers and sisters, most of them were athletes. And I was too, to a certain extent. I would get held back a lot because of my condition. They would never let me play basketball.
Mm-hmm.
Too much running. I'd play softball. But 7th and 8th grade, fine. I did really good. I always made good grades. My 8th grade teacher, I really liked art. And I was really into it. Everything I did, she would just, praise me about it. And then one day she says, well, Homa, you should be an artist. Because, a lot of Indian kids grow up and that's what they are. And me being precocious like I am, and it's kind of like, are you telling me that's all I have to look forward to is to be an artist? And yes, I like what I'm doing, but I don't know if that's really the vocation I want. But she said that, and I didn't say anything to her, too shy, too respectful, but I kept that within myself for a long time. And I thought, surely there's more than that. Yes, I might have some ability, but I don't think that's what I'm going to do with my life, So from the 9th grade to the 12th grade, I started focusing on business education courses, and PE, physical ed, because we had it then. I wasn't even thinking about college. I was thinking about getting the skills that I needed to either work in a bank or work at Tinker Air Force Base, because that's the area we lived. And so I think it was my senior year, just before Christmas. My older brother had already gone to school on a football scholarship. My older sister was already in college on scholarships, but I thought, well, I want to go to college, but I don't want to go where they're going. They're going to Northeastern and Tahlequah. We were raised in a strict Southern Baptist home, and my sister is already telling me stories about partying and people drinking and stuff like that. So that was my thing. I didn't want to go there because of that. So I heard about Bacon, but I also knew I had to take that ACT test, because right there, the last semester of my senior year, I finally started thinking, hey, maybe I ought to go to college. I didn't prepare, because if you know you're going to go to college, even your junior year, you start this track where you take courses that are going to prepare you for college. Not me. So I decided there, I had to hurry up and get the money together, take the test, get myself set up to take the test, and I took it. Passed. I did okay. I probably could have done better if I'd been more prepared, but I did enough to get accepted into college. And then I started working on all the documents that you have to work on to get into college. And I was accepted at Bacon. Started that fall after I graduated, fall of '69. So.
And kind of doing general studies, but still with this interest in business.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
So I read you ended up at the University of Georgia. Was that way later?
No.
Is that correct?
It was that summer after I graduated from Bacon.
Okay, with your associate's degree, because
Mm-hmm.
it was a junior college at that point.
Mm-hmm. It was a junior college back then. I got my AA degree in 1971. And I didn't want to go home because I was pretty independent-minded. So I learned about getting a position there in Muscogee with the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs. the eastern side of the state for the 5 civilized tribes, they were located there in Muscogee at that time. So I applied and got the position. It's just a summer position. And with my background, I qualified to work in the finance department. So while I was working there, it was the finance department, but for whatever reason, they had the guy that was over the scholarship part of it, and his office was just right there by our offices. And I learned through the older people, the people that worked there, that they realized there were some issues that weren't quite right between the western and the eastern side, because the western side had their own agency, but they were always running out of money for their students. So what they would do is they would try to get funding from the eastern side. And the lady said, well, you know, that's well and good, but what we see, because we see all the documents, that you guys are getting cheated out of some of this money that's supposed to be your own money. And we go, oh my goodness, you know. And then the one lady, and I won't say her name, but she showed me some things to support what she was telling me. And I said, you know, I've had to really fight to get some funding to go to school these past 2 years. I did try to get into OU. I did apply. Mm-hmm. But I didn't qualify for a lot of assistance because my dad worked for the federal government. And going by their formula, I didn't qualify for some of the assistance that other kids did. So that was off the market, you know. I applied, but I couldn't afford it, so couldn't go. Something that the ladies shared with me really sparked, it kind of got my back up, and I just thought, why is it that way? Oh, I know what it was. They showed me a folder of a kid that was from the western side. But little did they know, I knew that family. And I knew exactly, they only had 2 kids. One was my age, the other was still in high school. Father works for the federal government, mom works for the state. So they have a good income. Now why is that kid, same age as me, getting a full ride, and I'm having to scrap for whatever it is I want? I can't go to OU because I can't get enough money. Yeah, and so that really got to me. So she encouraged me to go talk with the director. And wow. So I did. He met with me. And see, that's the interesting thing about me. I can be very quiet and meek and just go about my business. But you tell me something like that, I'm prepared to go to battle. You know, you give me some information, you give me just enough information, you know, I'm going to go to battle. So I set up this simple little meeting with him. We had the door open. Once we started talking, and he realized I was not going to back down from my stance, he closed the door. And he says, let me tell you, young lady. And then, you know, I don't even remember what all he said. But not too many days later, I get a phone call from Bacon, the financial aid officer over there. And he says, Lahoma, there's a scholarship available. It's a full ride. It's at the University of Georgia. The United Southeastern Tribes of that area want to bring some Native kids to go to school down here. Would you be interested? I said, yes. So that's how I got to Georgia on a full scholarship.
Still focusing on business? Or
no, by that time I decided I'd be a teacher.
Okay.
I wanted to be a teacher. And maybe in business.
Right.
But I knew I had to take all the prep courses.
Right.
And so that's what this program was focused on too.
I see, Native.
It was focused on secondary education, social sciences.
Okay.
But when I was down there, they had us set up in this really nice program. They called us we were considered honors students, and some of the courses we actually had with the school's honor students. But then most of our classes, it was just the 15 of us native students. But I met Dr. David Camphouse, well-known child, I think he's written books for child psychology. And Dr. E. Paul Torrance, another positive psychologist, I guess. That was his, no, creativity, that's right, creativity and psychology. So those two kind of got me interested in that part, but we were still training to become secondary education teachers. But there were a lot of differences down there, especially just the simple system, what they call the trimester system versus the semester system. And this little girl from Oklahoma wasn't accustomed to going to school every day, you know, and having to keep up with all those things. Right. And I was required to take some courses that I should have taken, you know, like in high school, you know, preparation courses. Mm-hmm. They were very interesting courses, you know. Some of them were difficult. And after a while, I just said, I wasn't keeping I had a C average. And you can't have a C average on a scholarship. So I lost my scholarship. Came back home, went to Northeastern after all, because I heard they had a really good secondary education program. And that's where I graduated with my secondary education credentials.
And it sounds like
in business with a minor in physical education.
Okay. And it sounds like the school situation, you didn't get to go because of, you know, Creek history, and you didn't really get to explore the state. You weren't down. You didn't really get to come down at Moundville. You didn't visit Moundville or get to.
Oh, we did.
Oh, did you?
That was part of the program.
It was part of the program.
They took us to the Mississippi Choctaw Reservation. And back then, it wasn't too many years after they had the civil rights murders down there. Mm-hmm. And this was the first time I ever had been treated the way we got treated. We went to, one of our professors wanted to take us to see a movie. Mm-hmm. And the people selling the tickets saw all these dark kids lined up behind him. And they refused to sell him tickets. And he was really, really upset. And he just told them what for. Mm-hmm. And they finally did let him purchase the tickets. But I spoke up and I said, Dr. Rice, I don't want to go. I said, I don't care that they finally gave in. I don't like being treated that way. I've never been treated that way. I'm not going to enjoy the movie, you know, even if you get us in. And he says, no, Lahoma, we're all going in there. We're all going to watch this movie. And to this day, I don't even know what movie we saw.
Right.
Because I was so focused on the anger, you know, what I was feeling inside and hurt, and, you know, just because we were a different color. Mm-hmm. And that night, I didn't sleep well because he said that was the area where those two civil rights guys were killed and taken away and whatever, you know. Mm-hmm. So I understand there was some sort of a commotion that took place that night with some of the other students and some of the people in the pool because they chose to go swimming. And I stayed in the room. I wouldn't go swimming. And they still talk about it to this day. So I guess something else happened that I wasn't involved in.
I remember reading about that actually.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up at Northeastern and you graduate from that program, and then what happens?
Well, when I was at Bacone, I had met several Navajo kids and hung out with some, and they would tell me stories about the Navajo land, you know, their life, what it was like. And I thought that was so interesting. So once I got my credentials, my teaching credentials, I did look to working in Oklahoma, but at the time, I think they were paying Oklahoma teachers something like $3,000 a year. Can you believe that? And then I saw where they had an opening in Arizona, Monument Valley High School. And I saw the salary. I thought, wow, it's a big difference. Their starting salary was over $11,000.
Wow.
And so I took it. I thought, well, this is a good opportunity for me to go out there and see this land that I've heard a lot of nice stories about, fun stories. I was still single, so I asked my youngest brother if he would go out there with me. And Mom and Dad said, sure, we'll sign over guardianship to you so that if anything happens, he'll be taken care of. And so my first year, he went with me. And I loved teaching there. I loved the kids. But my younger brother was always getting into issues, problems. He was always creating problems. There was one time where I had a school meeting with the superintendent there, the principal, a couple other administrators, and then all these families came in. They were Navajo people, dressed in their regular dress, their velveteen dresses and all their turquoise, and they were upset. What happened was when I left on the weekend to take the cheerleaders, I was also a cheerleader sponsor, taking them down to Phoenix, just doing my job. Come back, and I kind of noticed some things, and I asked Johnny about it. There was a crack in my mirror in the bathroom, and he said that it was like a big wind gust coming in. That was not out of the norm, so I believed it. But it turns out it was a whole lot more than that. He had a big party while I was not there, and a couple of the guys got into it, and one of them got really drunk, and they didn't hurt each other too much, but they apparently got into a fight, and it ended up in the bathroom or whatever. And so the parents were really, really angry, upset, because I was living in school housing, and that's where it happened. So my brother did things like that. And I was the one, because I was the adult, I was the one who had to answer to it. But I had the school administrators on my side, and they explained that I was away doing it, what I was supposed to be doing. And my brother just happens to live there with me, and he took advantage of that. He even took my car. See, I didn't have to drive my car because we had transportation to the school. And so I left my car there with the keys, see, that's how I was naive. I was just thinking my younger brother, he's here, he's going to go to school and move in, not knowing he was going to get into all these situations. But that was the first year. So signed a contract to go back the second year. But I didn't want him going with me because I didn't want to face any more problems. So I went back. The first week, orientation and all, it just was so lonely. When you're not married, you don't have family there, and it's just you. It gets really quiet, this being up there in the desert. So after that week, I told the administrator, said, I think I'm just going to go back home. So then when I came home, I needed a job. It was the beginning of school, and I'd heard about Concho. So I went there, and yes, I got a position, but it was like a temporary position. I wasn't a full-fledged teacher. I mean, I was, but not in their system. So they assigned me to the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade lab courses. We did math and reading, a little bit of social studies, mostly math and reading, language arts. I was there for a year, and in that period of time, I got married. So the next year, because I knew this was a temporary position and I wasn't getting the benefits, so I found out the agency, the BIA agency there, had an opening in real property management. So that kind of business stuff, you
Right.
know. So I applied there and I got chosen. So I was there for a year. Then I had my first child, and he had major problems, so I quit my job to take care of him for a year.
Mhm.
And then after that, while I was caring for him, I got a visit from a social worker who was a social worker for the state of Oklahoma. And she was just visiting with me one day, and she goes, "So you have a bachelor's degree?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "I've been a teacher." She said, "Well, you should apply for a social work position." And so I did, and I worked for the state as a social worker for quite a few years, you know, from 1980 until 1990, yeah. No, 91, 11 years.
So you're getting all these great different kinds of backgrounds
And always working with people.
and working with people, yes, negotiating and
Caring about them.
Yeah.
Because my years as a social worker was really interesting. I worked with the age blind and disabled. Well, the first 2 years I worked as I call it benefits coordinator, but that's not what it was. It was called the eligibility worker. So I would do their applications, review all their income, and see if they were eligible for food stamps or eligible for what we called AFDC back then. So I did that for almost 2 years. And then I moved up to the age blind and disabled. It's more of a specialty unit.
Mm-hmm. So at some point, you decided to get your master's degree?
Mm-hmm.
And is it in counseling? Or is it in social work? Okay.
Well, in the period of time, let's see, the year after I started working for the state, I had my second child. And so then I had 2 children. One had all these special needs, and he wasn't covered by my insurance. They wouldn't insure him. So because he had all these medical needs, I went to Dean A. McGee Eye Institute first because my pediatrician says, "I don't think he just has a lazy eye. One of his eyes would keep going this way." She said, "We'll watch him for a while." But by the time he was 12 months old, she said, "I don't think it's lazy eye." She says, "I'm going to send you to Dean A. McGee Eye Institute and see what they can tell us." So the first day we went there, they found out right away that his pituitary gland was just small. So the optic nerve was not the size it should be. So he was blind in one of his eyes. And so we went from there to, they recommended this program that was just getting off the ground. It's a research project on the growth hormone, you know. Well, it wasn't that quick, you know, we had to go through some studies first and do lots of little things with him to see if that was really what the issue was. So anyway, getting involved in that research project was a major deal for the 2 of us. I was still working full time. My daughter was born the year after I started. It was 2 years after, she was 3 years old. I was divorced. My husband left us, so I had these 2 little kids, along with major issues. And I'm a single mom, working every day, trying to take care of all their needs, and paying the mortgage and all that kind of stuff. And then I started thinking, well, I'm not making much here working for the state. I like what I do, but I don't make enough money. So I applied for a position with the post office. And I got it. I mean, I was on the list, and they said it was up to me to take it. But things were getting pretty rough with the ex-husband because he was giving the kids a hard time and giving me a hard time. So I decided, well, maybe we just need to put more space between us. If we're too close to where he is, and he comes around and bothers us all the time. I mean, the kids are still going to have to see him, but At least he can't just come around and bother me. So we moved to this side of the state, to Henrietta. And still working for the state of Oklahoma as a social worker. I got a transfer with the help of one of the senators because he knew the family and Dad had shared with him the situation. So he helped me get a transfer over here, still as a social worker. We had really, we were doing okay because then we had family, but I still felt like the income was not like I expected. Worked this hard for a college education, still not making a lot of money. So I thought, Tulsa had just opened up the University Center at Tulsa. So you got Northeastern, Langston, OSU, and OU. Well, they didn't even have the fancy campus they have now. I thought, well, I think I really need to try for my master's degree because if I get that, I might move up and, make more income. So I applied and I was accepted initially by Northeastern State. They said, sure, we'll take you in. You can take 2 courses, but because you don't have a bachelor, I was very interested in psychology too. So what sparked my interest there was working with all these people with disabled conditions and mentally disabled. But I didn't have privilege to I didn't even have privilege to what their diagnosis was. I just had to work with them. And sometimes I had to go out in areas that were kind of scary to be at, and I would have to work with these folks. But I had to be really careful as to how I worked with them, because anything could set them off, But I thought that was odd that we weren't given some background, about these folks before we were sent out to go visit them. So, but I was also curious. I wonder what's wrong with Miss So-and-so. I wonder what her diagnosis is. I wonder what it is that makes her the way she is. So that was what sparked my interest to go after my master's degree. And Northeastern had the master's in counseling psychology. So they did accept me temporarily. They said, we want to take you in full time, but you don't have a bachelor's degree in psychology. To be in our program, you have to have 18 hours undergraduate psychology. Of course, I only had maybe 6 hours, So I said, okay, this is what I want. So I borrowed the money, took those 18 hours, most of them under Langston, some under Northeastern. And I got past that. And then they said, okay, you're in our program. And it was a really rigid program, but it was very interesting because, especially with abnormal psychology, many of the people that I had worked with and wondered about, when I was learning, I guess of a basic diagnosis, and they would give us little scenarios about people, and I was like, well, that sounds like so-and-so. And so that's how I was able to learn the concepts, because I would put one concept with somebody that I had met as a social worker. And I actually aced the abnormal psychology course. So anyway, then at that point I figured, well, this is my calling, I guess. I've got the background now. All these years I've been watching people. I got to the point where I really wondered what their diagnosis was. And now I'm learning, here's this, this, and this would be this person's diagnosis, most likely. So those years I spent working on that master's degree, I really enjoyed, really prepared me to be a counselor, I think.
So when you did come to Oklahoma State for your doctorate in psychology, what was your area of research?
Well, my area of research, well, let me tell you what happened after I got my master's degree. Because I was still a social worker and I was working. Well, I was almost just maybe a semester away from obtaining my master's degree. My husband wanted to move to Tulsa. One of my colleagues, well, he wanted me to be a vocational rehab counselor. And he was always encouraging me to do that. So here, I said, well, you have to have a master's degree. He said, yes, but you almost have it. And so he worked with one of the senators, and they got me set up to transfer to Tulsa as a voc rehab counselor. Not in Tulsa.
Okay.
I didn't quite have my master's degree. And I also knew I was going to go on and earn my LPC, become a licensed professional counselor. So in my mind, I thought, yes, that's well and good. I'll be up here in Tulsa with my husband because he's working up here. On the other hand, what about this?
Because you
got
remarried.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, I had gotten remarried while I was living in Henrietta. And after I'd started my working on my master's program. So they helped me get a transfer to Tulsa. The folks in charge of the vocational rehabilitation program, they really didn't want to hire me because I didn't have a master's degree, which is what they told me. They were really tough on me. And I said, well, I've made it this far and I'm going to get it, Then I'm going to get my LPC, and if I have to get my CRC, which is Certified Rehab Counselor, I will do that too. So I fulfilled all my promises. I had worked there, from 92, I think it was like 91 or 92. Anyway, it was 99 when we'd heard about this program through Oklahoma State University, American Indians into Psychology. You had to make a little application, send it in. If they accepted you, you had to spend the summer there as a fellow. So I took some time off from work because they did accept me, and I really enjoyed it. They introduced us to what it would be like to work on your doctorate degree, the little research projects that you start out doing, and then eventually working on a major project or dissertation. And they just really did a really good orientation to that. Then towards the end, they actually asked us to apply for these programs. And so I applied for both clinical and counseling. And I was considered a non-traditional person because most of the people were younger. They were like in their 30s, and here I was almost 50. Now I didn't make it, clinical didn't accept me, but they said they tried to explain to me that it did have something to do with my age and I already had a master's degree. They try to take younger people in. They can't really discriminate, but they at least they were being honest. But if you already had a master's degree, you're going to have to work on another master's degree because that's just the way it's set up. So, but the counseling psychology didn't matter that I already had a master's degree. You would be working on your doctorate degree. So that's the one I was accepted at, and that's one I took. So once I was accepted, I was still working, but I didn't let anybody know where I worked that I had been accepted. Because there was a lot going on now. The federal government had come down on them on that particular program. Don't know what sparked that, but they were learning that several other people didn't have the certifications that they should have to be working there. And a lot of them didn't even have master's degrees. And so I was really determined to get into the doctorate program at that time because here they gave me a difficult time and they hired me when I almost had my master's degree. And I was guaranteed to get my LPC. And if they wanted me to get a CRC, I would definitely get the CRC also because that was just a matter of a test after you got your master's degree. The LPC, you had to do some 3,000 hours, and I had that ability to get with one of my coworkers. So I did a lot of work to earn that master's degree and then to receive those certifications. I worked hard to get all that, only to find out later that that wasn't the true story. There weren't very many people there that had their master's degree. And if they didn't have their master's degree, they definitely didn't have the certification. And yet I couldn't get promotions. I would apply for promotions, supervisors' positions. I was always an overachiever. If we were required to make 100% on one aspect, I might make 200%, and another maybe 300%. Just on and on like that, and I still wasn't getting promotions. So all that played into me deciding to get my doctorate degree. So had good reason.
Yes. Who were one or two of your teachers, instructors in the doctoral program that you remember?
I remember all of them. Dr. Carlozzi initially was one of my favorites, and actually he's the one that ended up hooding me.
Okay.
Sue Jacobs came on, I think, a year after I was there, and she's still here, Dr. Sue Jacobs. Marie Maville, she was one of my favorites, but she didn't stay there. She left and went to Columbia University. Dr. Robbins, Rocky Robbins, he was there, but then he went back to OU. Those were my favorites.
So how do you use some of the these accumulated skills in your work today? How?
Well, Sue encouraged me to be involved with I can't even remember what the title is, professional teachers. I can't remember the title of her little project. But it wasn't fully off the ground at the time. But she would invite me to their little dinners or luncheons or whatever, and I would go and listen, And I even did a simple little portfolio, but I wasn't really one of the fellows. And I appreciated that, just the information I picked up from going to those little events helped me when I actually did teach at a university, a few years later, 2004, 2006, I taught at Southern Arkansas University. So I always appreciated Sue for that, because she just invited me. She didn't make me qualify for anything. She just asked me to come along and enjoy whatever it was they were offering. So I really enjoyed that. Now what I do now, the administration part of it, I think deadlines and such, you don't have much wiggle room. You constantly had deadlines working on your doctorate degree, and you had to get those met, because if you didn't, you'd pay the price. So in this administrative part of my work, I always meet my deadlines. I've been given some pats on the back, because in the Oklahoma area, I've been told that I'm the only one that presents the monthly reports that are supposed to go to the area office. I am the only one. Now it's going to change. Everybody else is going to have to, but they should have been doing these all along. So, and it's not easy. Yes, you have to have all your documents together, all your information, but you know when it has to be in. So I try to get my things in before, not knowing, hey, I was told I have to do this, so I'm going to do it, and I'm going to, do my best to get in a good report. So I think going through this program has helped, because you have to be organized and you have to meet a lot of deadlines,
And I read you were one of the first people to be certified in telemental health. And I wondered.
I was one of the first in Muscogee.
Okay.
The Muscogee area. Now, when I went to work there at the VA, there was a young lady already working that program, but she didn't have anything established for Oklahoma, or for that area. So she put me in charge, and so I started attending the national meetings and learned that if we didn't do something soon, that they were going to take all that equipment away from us, because it was pretty expensive. And they had it before I came on board, but they weren't using it. So yes, for the Muscogee VA, I was the first one to actually use the telehealth equipment.
And it's basically sort of counseling over the telephone with the aid of sort of.
No, it was their Polycom system.
Polycom system, okay.
It's kind of like, well, it's like that, but on a smaller scale.
Right.
You know, like a little computer, and it's private, and it has a little camera that, you know, zooms in on you, but then on the other side, they've got the same equipment, and you're talking with them, working with them. And I did the individual first, and once I was certified for what we call cognitive processing therapy, there was a social worker that was housed down in Telehealth, and he asked me to help him get certified in cognitive processing therapy. Mm-hmm. And he was seeing individual veterans down there. But we put our heads together, and we decided we'd do a group. So we were the first to do a group over the telemedicine or telehealth.
Right.
We weren't the first to do a group. There were already groups going on, but using that device.
To do it that way with that technology. I also read that you received a Purple Heart certificate from the Purple Heart Association, I guess, for your work with veterans.
Yeah, just to keep confidentiality, I'll just kind of, I'll try to, talk the best I can around that. Well, I guess he doesn't care because he made it known, but I won't say his name. But he was a veteran, but he was also an employee of the VA, and he was also head of that, I don't know if it's the Oklahoma Association. He just happened to be at that level where he was the lead person. So he appreciated the work that I did with him. He said in all those years after the war, he'd never had anybody work with him. And he had never been able to make the progress that he had made until I worked with him. Mm-hmm. And he really appreciated it. See, I was actually assigned to the new veterans, OEA and what do they call it? The Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation, what was the other one? Mm-hmm. OIF and OEF, but I can't remember what the E stands for. But anyway, there were the young ones coming in from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was originally assigned to that specialty unit, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I got my certification doing the work I did with them. And I had like 12 success stories. So that was good. Was the only one certified at that time. Then they started assigning me to Vietnam vets. Okay, so I had 3 Vietnam vets. And of course, they're much older. Mm-hmm. And then they assigned me to 1 Korean vet. And he was quite older. But I had success with all of them. But this particular one appreciated the help that he received so much that he made sure before I left that I got a citation. And he gave me a plaque. And I just really appreciate it. I still have it. I still put it in my office.
That's neat. I know one way you give back to OSU is you often make presentations to classes, I heard, and you also sometimes tap OSU students to help you with particular projects. I wondered if you could talk about one occasion when you tapped some OSU students to help you with something.
When I worked at White Eagle, I was there alone maybe my first year from 2010 to 2011. And then I was approached by a representative of OSU. And he informed me of a couple of Native students who are working on their master's degrees. And then he asked if I would be willing to work with them, let them come there and do their practicum and do their, I was fine with that. I said, sure. Turns out I knew one of them. I didn't know the other, but I knew the one. Turns out it's this young lady whose event I'm going to today. So he went back to the school and let the ones who knew were needing this site for these two. Because I guess whatever funding they were receiving, they had to do their practicum with Native people. So I got a nice letter from their advisor, introducing them, telling me about them. And she was happy that I was willing to do this. Well, it turns out she's one of my professors, one of my past professors when I was working on my doctorate degree. And so we had that connection, So it was good for them. Once they got their practicum done, they asked if they could do their internship there. Okay. I was okay with that, but we had to do a lot of finagling because we didn't have a lot of room out there. So we had to figure out where we were going to put them. Because before we were all kind of sharing my office. We staggered the times. But for internship, we actually had to have some place for them because they had to see so many people. So we got that worked out. And they were both successful in earning their master's degrees. Then I was able, because my little program was expanding, and it was appreciated that I had these extra people providing the service, that they pulled in a double wide trailer for me. And they set that up for me. So then we had 3 offices and a testing room. And then all this open space for a lobby area and our own facilities,
Right.
So Ashley went on to work on her doctorate degree. She got accepted after she earned her master's degree. Jake decided to stay with me so that he could work on his licensed professional counseling credentials. And then after, I guess, a year and a half, he got his license. And then I convinced the tribe to hire him on as a counselor. And so then I had one full-time counselor and then me, psychologist. And then they had a program, it's a grant program, that they wanted me to coordinate. And so I could hire some students that were working on their master's degrees. I got one from Northwestern Oklahoma State University, and I got one who was obtaining her master's degree through an online program. But in between there, OSU contacted me again and asked me if I would allow this doctorate level student to come on board. So I worked with her for over a year. She would come there and provide services for her. Her services were mostly focused on assessment. She did some counseling, but mostly assessment. So that's how I helped them out there. And then eventually I moved to Clinton.
Right.
I'm still training students, but most of them are coming through Oklahoma University Health Science Center.
Okay.
Now the director there actually many, many years ago received her psychology degree from OSU. So she's made arrangements to be able to take in Ashley once again.
Great.
So over the past year, I've worked with one intern who's working on her doctorate degree. I've worked with 2 postdocs who are working on their requirement for a postdoc before you can get licensed. And one is still with me. Then Ashley will come on board in September. So still have that connection to OSU.
That's neat. Well, we're going to wind up here, but I wondered if you could talk a little bit about one or two volunteer um, activities. How you manage it, I don't know, but you volunteer a lot too with different organizations.
Well, one of my favorite ones is the one I just talked with you about,
Okay.
the Baycom Board of Trustees.
Yes.
You know, we don't get paid anything. That's all. Unless you live out of state, they'll purchase your airline ticket for you.
Right.
Um,
And they're facing challenges right now, but you're in there at the meetings.
Because I love Baycom. You know, when they were talking about merging with Oklahoma Baptist University, I, of course, was advocating and giving my side of why I didn't think that would be proper for what Baycom stands for. I finally just said, I respect OBU. Their philosophy is so much different than what, Baycom focuses on. And we would lose so much of what Baycom is if we were to merge. And so here I am, former Baycom student with lots of love in my heart. And I said, I can't do it. If everybody else, votes yes, you're still going to see that no from me. And sure enough, I even wrote it, so they could see it wasn't just going to be voiced. It was a big no. I know it doesn't look like no on the camera, but a big no.
Yeah.
And it's been a battle. That has to be my favorite volunteer program. I don't know what else you want me to talk about, but I've volunteered to work with the group in White Eagle and their Chilocco project, and
Right.
I brought in some of the VA people and the
Yes.
Indian Health Service people, and I guess they're doing well.
Yes, it's that
Because one lady was
awesome.
telling me about Chilocco yesterday. She goes, Lahoma, did you read those articles I had about Chilocco and all the things that they're doing up there? And I said, we actually visited up there and we saw that. We saw those buildings.
Yes.
And I said, and it was just so disheartening. She goes, well, they finally put a stop to it. And I said, well, good. They should.
I'm so glad that's getting some traction. Well, then my last thing will be, I read you're a big Thunder fan.
Oh, yeah. I'm a big Thunder fan.
Do you travel?
Do I what?
Do you travel to out-of-state games or?
If I can. That's why I'm trying to convince my husband, and he's on board with it. We're hoping that his last placement in working with the Boy Scouts of America will be in Oklahoma City, because one, that's my hometown, but two, now we have the Thunder. And I said, if we're living right there, I can buy season tickets. I can go to all the home games, So yes, that's my big dream. But I was really saddened when I saw that Nick Collison retired, And I'm hoping that they will do something like hire him as an assistant coach, Yes, I'm a big Thunder fan. You should see my office.
Well, thank you for your time today, Lahoma.
You're welcome.